The long-awaited KTM 990 Duke shows up on test rides and raises exciting questions. With an innovative front end, a fresh 990cc inline two-cylinder, and a modified display, innovations can be found around every corner. What's behind the unusual display mount and novel lamp mask? How does the redesigned swing arm affect the riding experience? And what hidden surprises does the revised inline two-cylinder bring? These changes could fundamentally alter both the design and performance of the Duke range. It's safe to assume that it will replace the 890 Duke, introduced in 2021, which in turn replaced the 790 Duke. We take a close look at the latest images and what they tell us about the 990 Duke 2024. And with that, welcome to Motorcycles News. During test rides, the new Duke 990 was spotted with an all-new front end and a fresh 990cc inline two-cylinder. In the prototype pictures, the new design looks like it was created with a 3D printer from a hobby workshop, which may also be due to the lack of paint. However, that it really is the new face of the new Duke range can be concluded from the fact that the 1290 Super Duke R has also been spotted with this front mask. The basic shape of the new mask has not really changed and remains true to the previous shape. Integrated are two round LED lamps, one above the other. We can assume that these will again be flanked by LED strips that serve as daytime running lights. However, another cover, such as a transparent lamp mask, does not seem to be planned. As usual, the turn signals are mounted above the mask. There don't seem to be any major changes here, though the shape may have stretched out a bit. The display's mount has been revised, but this raises questions. Is it a temporary solution or already the final design? However, this question is rather raised by the display itself. The current shape suggests that it is not the final component. Unlike the previous models, the display has a rather square design and is no longer drawn horizontally. Furthermore, the flattened corners, a characteristic design element of the previous Dukes, are no longer present. In direct comparison, you could think that the display looks less high-end and rather cheap. That is purely from the design language and the rear view. Unfortunately, the display is hard to see in the normal view, and you can't see a display at all, but it looks a bit like a large touchpad. On another picture, you can see a bit more, and the display is already familiar. It is the same one that is used on the CMoto 800 MT, so it doesn't seem to be a placeholder after all. On the Adventure model, the TFT color display is equipped with voice control, Bluetooth connectivity, arrow navigation, and multimedia functions. On the left of the bracket, you could also guess a small flap that could hide a USB charging port. Also noticeable is the redesign of the KTM 990 Duke's handlebar gauges. The modified four-way buttons are particularly eye-catching. Their design appears to be curved inward toward the center. This modification could mean a significant improvement in operability. The curvature makes it easier for the thumb to reach the center of the keys, allowing it to intuitively select the right key. The mirrors have also been revised. They now show noticeable cutouts in the rear area. Their design differs significantly from that of their predecessors. They no longer run in a 90-degree bend, but rather pull up diagonally. The fact that the upside-down fork of the KTM 990 Duke comes from WP should hardly surprise anyone. One element that does cause confusion is the additional hydraulics that run from the height of the light parallel to the upside-down fork down to the fender. Whether this is a special measuring device for the test rides, or whether the part will also come in series production, and what function it might serve, currently remains a mystery. In addition to these changes in the chassis area, the fairing also features some innovations. The small side fairing next to the tank has also been revised. In contrast, the frame of the 990 Duke seems to have remained unchanged. Changes have been made to the swing arm. Recent pictures show that it is now no longer equipped with static bars, but has a more solid design. A key point of the redesign of the KTM 990 Duke is certainly the revised inline two-cylinder. I've already covered information on this in a separate video. After footage of a design registration surfaced that is said to be from CF Moto. Allegedly, CF Moto is to build the new KTM engine and will certainly then be allowed to use it in their own models. The basic design and dimensions of the engine have been retained, but under the surface a lot has changed. Among other things, the cylinder head, the housing, the oil pan and the covers have been redesigned. Of note is the redesign of the oil pan, which has not only been lowered but also moved to the side. This change creates space for the catalytic converter and exhaust system. Expanding oil and water cooler also indicates increased engine performance. It remains exciting to see what effect these changes will have in detail on the engine's inner workings and performance. The KTM 990 Duke comes with a completely revised exhaust system. Compared to the previous model, there is a noticeable change in the manifold design. They now draw a much stronger arc before leading into a large collector under the engine. Also noticeable is the rear muffler, which also appears more massive than on the previous model, although it is difficult to make it out in the available pictures. The design of the rear section of the new KTM 990 Duke also shows changes. In particular, the conventional tail light is now replaced by turn signals with integrated tail light and brake light. However, this approach will depend on the regulations in different markets. As such, an integrated solution is not allowed everywhere. If you look closely, you will also discover a sensor above the new lighting unit. At first glance, you might think it's a radar, but that's unlikely for this model, yet. It is more likely a sensor for data acquisition during the test drive. It is important to emphasize that there are many ambiguities in the analysis of the new KTM 990 Duke model. Not all the parts seen in the previous images will necessarily be found in the final version of the bike. Some could be for camouflage or to protect certain design elements during the testing phase. So until KTM officially unveils the final model, all info is to be considered speculation.